Chenhu had the audacity to go to the dragon god of air after killing his younger brother, the eight-headed dragon, god of typhoons. Chenhu seeks to obtain something that will force Phoenix to surrender the primordial fire. But will Chenhu even make it out alive from the halls of the dragon god? Episode 6. Water wears away stone, and audacity melts ore. The fire had gone out. Not the kind that dances in a hearth and smells of pine. The kind that lives inside a man's chest when he understands. Tomorrow will be worse than today, but he will wake up anyway. Chenhu sat beside a small fire, a handful of coals, a thin thread of smoke, and ate rice with a salted plum, sitting straight, as the master had taught him, though the master had long since turned to ash in the mountains, and there was no one left to watch his posture. Sifu sat across from him, legs crossed, eating with that particular focused expression worn by people who have survived hunger and remember its taste. Mo did not eat. He stared into the fire, and in his dark eyes the reflected flame turned slowly, like a burning leaf on the surface of a night pond. Tiger stood before them, not sitting, standing the way a god of war stands when something has deeply offended him, legs wide apart, arms crossed, with an expression that on a human face would be called rage, but on his face was simply exhaustion at human inconsistency. He had been silent for several minutes, and the silence had weight, like the silence before a storm, when the birds have already gone quiet and the rain has not yet begun. Quote underscore 0 underscore, he said at last. Not as a question. Like a man saying aloud what he cannot hold inside. Chenhu lifted his eyes from the bowl. Quote 1, Tiger clarified. Quote 2, quote 3, said Chenhu. Quote 4, Tiger repeated, with the intonation of a man who has just been told his house is burned down, and the one responsible is looking at him with complete calm. Quote underscore 5 underscore. He took a step forward, then stopped, because apparently he understood that any further movement would require a level of control he did not currently possess. Quote 6, quote 7, said Chenhu, and returned to his rice. Sifu set down his chopsticks. Quote 8, he said quietly, to no one in particular. Tiger looked at him with a long gaze that contained many things, none of them flattering. Then he turned back to Chenhu. Quote 9, quote, he said. Quote 10, quote. Chenhu was silent. Not because there was nothing to say, but because the answer had not yet taken shape into words. It existed still in that intermediate state where a thought is present, but has no language yet. Quote 11, he replied evenly. Quote 12, quote 13. Tiger repeated quietly, and in that repetition there was such richness of intonation that Sifu, as a precaution, shifted slightly to one side. And then the roar came. Not a sound, something greater. What happens to air when the air itself grows afraid? The earth beneath them did not tremble. It was as if it remembered that it had a bottom and tried to retreat there. The fire flared and died. Sifu grabbed both bowls, the reflex of a man who, in any unclear situation, thinks first of preserving the food. The roar rolled across the sky and died somewhere distant, or sank into the earth, or became that compressed pressure in the ears that remains after a nearby thunderclap. Tiger straightened. Something in him had changed. Not his posture, not his expression. Something internal and unreadable. Sifu breathed, said Tiger shortly. A pause. The fire blinked. Chenhu set down his bowl. Mo rose without a word. He was already standing while Sifu was still finishing his surprise. Quote 17, asked Chenhu. Quote 18, said Tiger. Quote 19. He paused. Quote 20. Chenhu looked at him. Quote 21, he said. Not a question. Tiger said nothing, but did not deny it. That was enough. Tiger raised his hand, and his claws, enormous, black, each one a short sword in itself, cut through the air. Not the way men and their instruments cut air, without sound, without resistance. A tear simply appeared in space, dark and unstable, with edges that glowed faintly with that cold white light found only on the deepest winter nights, when the moon is hidden and the snow glows anyway, for reasons no one can explain. Quote 22, said Tiger. Quote 23. Sifu looked at the portal, then at Tiger, then at the portal again. Quote 24, he said without conviction, and stepped into the darkness first, which was, if one thought about it, a considerably braver act than it appeared. Chenhu stepped through second, Mo last, and before the darkness closed behind him, he turned and looked at Tiger. The god of war stood watching them go, and in his gaze there was something Mo did not have time to read, something that required time, which there was none of now. The portal closed. The halls of the air dragon had no walls. That was the first fact Chenhu understood when the portal closed behind him and the darkness gave way to light. Not the sharp, eye-cutting light that strikes after a long night, but the diffuse, milk-white light that fills the air above a mountain pass in the hour when the fog has not yet decided whether to rise or stay. There was a floor, wide slabs of white stone, polished to the degree that the sky was reflected in them. There was a ceiling, but somewhere very high above, where the eye could no longer distinguish where architecture ended and cloud began. But there were no walls. In their place, open space on all sides, and beyond that space, sky, and sky again, and once more sky, without horizon, without earth, without a single point the eye of a man accustomed to knowing up from down could catch hold of. Sifu took one step forward, looked down, toward the gap between the floor slabs, and promptly stepped back. Quote 25, he said. Quote 26. Mo said nothing. He stood and looked ahead, toward the center of the hall, between columns of white nephrite, each as thick as a century-old cypress, where the air dragon hung. Not stood, not lay, but hung horizontally in midair. He was white. Not the white of snow or rice paper or bone, but the white of light when it contains not a single trace of color. Absolute, zero, original. His body was serpentine, enormous, endlessly long, disappearing somewhere behind the columns and returning from there, so that it was impossible to tell where the tail ended and the head began, until the head itself chose to reveal itself. The scales shimmered, not gleamed, but shimmered, the way the surface of water shimmers when wind passes over it with a touch too light to leave a wave. Along the spine ran crests, thin, translucent, resembling the fins of a deep-sea fish, and through them the outside sky showed clearly. The paws, 4 of them, with long, curved claws the color of old ivory, were tucked against the body with that negligent grace with which a cat tucks its paws when it has no need to hurry anywhere. The whiskers, long, thin, white as threads of spider silk at dawn, hung from the muzzle and moved slowly in the air, which here was never truly still. The eyes were closed. Chenhu took 3 steps forward, stopped, planted the enormous sword, the god-killer, vertically before him, point down, hilt up, and leaned on it the way one leans on a staff. On the blades something still darkened, something that in different light, in a different place, might have passed for a shadow in the metal, but here, in the whiteness of this hall, read exactly as what it was. Quote 27 he said. Silence. Then one whisker twitched, then the other. Then an eyelid, slowly, with the ponderous unhurriedness with which eyes are opened by beings who have no need of sleep, but sometimes close them simply because the external world does not merit constant attention. The eyes proved to be silver, not gray, silver, with a vertical pupil as black as ink, and with that strange inner luminescence found in mirrors in dark rooms. They reflect nothing, and from this seem to glow of their own accord. The dragon looked at the three of them. His gaze passed over Sifu and moved on. Over Mo, lingering a moment longer. Over Chenhu, and stayed. 28, said the dragon. His voice was everywhere at once. Not loud, but volumetric. The way wind is volumetric in a gorge. You feel it on the skin before you hear it with the ears. 30, said Chenhu. 32. The dragon shifted slowly. Did not fly, did not glide, but shifted, the way fog shifts. Was there, is here, and the movement between the 2 points was so smooth the eye could not fix upon it. Now the enormous head hung a few steps from Chenhu, close enough to feel the cold radiating from it, like the cold of mountain air at the altitude where trees no longer grow. Chenhu raised the sword, did not swing it, simply raised it, turned the blade toward the light, so that what darkened on it became visible without any possibility of not noticing. Quote, 34, he said. Quote, 35. The silence became different. The dragon did not move, did not change expression. Beings of this scale do not change expressions the way people do. Changes happen more slowly and more deeply, the way air pressure changes before a storm. But something shifted, in how he breathed, in how he held his head, in how the silver eyes became simultaneously a shade lighter and a shade colder. Quote, 36, he said at last, and in that syllable there was more content than in any ordinary sentence. Quote, 37, quote, quote, 38, quote, quote, 39, quote, quote, 40, quote, said Chenhu, quote, 41, quote. The dragon looked at him for a long time. Then, slowly, like a scroll unrolling, something passed across his muzzle that, with sufficient generosity, might be called a smile. Underscore, underscore, quote, underscore, 42, underscore, underscore, he said. Quote 43, quote 44, agreed Chenhu. Quote 45. The silence stretched like a bowstring. Quote 46, said the dragon, and in the word was not a threat, but something more dangerous. Interest. Chenhu lowered the sword. He spoke evenly, without haste, the way a man speaks who is not trying to persuade, but is laying out what he believes to be true, and leaving the listener to draw his own conclusions. Quote 47. He paused. Quote 48. Quote 49, said the dragon, and in his voice appeared that particular quality which cold acquires when it becomes wrath. Quote 50. Quote 51, said Chenhu. Quote 52. The dragon was silent. Quote 53. Chenhu continued. Quote 54. Quote 55, said the dragon slowly. Quote 56. Quote 57. He paused. Quote 58. A long silence. The dragon looked away, not in weakness, no, rather the gesture of one who takes a pause not because there is nothing to answer, but because the answer requires honesty, and honesty requires time. Quote 59. He said at last, and in those words there was no condescension, only the precision of a stated fact. Quote 60. Behind Chenhu, Sifu relaxed slightly, visibly enough that Mo glanced at him with the expression one gives a man who has nearly fallen and pretends he merely stumbled. Quote 61, said Chenhu. Quote 62. The dragon looked at him. Quote 63. Quote 64, said Chenhu evenly. Quote 65. Quote. A pause. Sifu tensed again. Mo moved imperceptibly closer to Chenhu. One step, unnoticeable, but Chenhu felt it. The dragon looked at the mortal before him at length, with that particular attention that people mistake for anger, but which is in fact its opposite, the full, unclouded interest of a being that rarely encounters anything worthy of interest. Quote 66, he said. Quote 67, a brief pause. Quote 68. Quote 69, said Chenhu. Quote 70. Quote 71, said the dragon quietly. Quote 72. He did not finish, but what remained unspoken was heard more clearly than any words. Quote 73, said the dragon, and his voice became slightly quieter, slightly more private, the way a great creature speaks to itself but does not object to witnesses. Quote 74. Sifu and Mo went still. Chenhu's face did not change. He stood and looked at the dragon with the calm that is not the absence of fear, but something that grows on the other side of fear, when a man has lived long enough in its presence. But you won't, he said. No, agreed the dragon. I will not. And again, that which might be called a smile, if beings of this scale smiled as humans do. The prayers of great solitary men are worth the prayers of thousands of common folk. If a man with such strength of spirit begins to give thanks to a god, that god grows stronger than 1,000 temples could make him. I want you to be indebted to me, Chenhu. That is more profitable than surrendering you to the lion. I thank you, said Chenhu evenly. But I ask, do not attempt to persuade me of anything. My heart is soaked through with vengeance, and there is no room in it now for anything else. The dragon looked at him. And what comes after? He asked. When you have fulfilled your purpose, what remains? Chenhu was silent, not because he had not heard the question, but because he had no answer. And this was one of the few states in which he allowed himself to be silent honestly, without concealment. I don't know, he said at last. I know, said the dragon quietly. You will continue to breathe. The strangeness of those words hung in the air, the white, cold, still air of the halls that belonged entirely to this being, without remainder, just as every breath and every valley of this world belonged to him. Then the dragon began slowly to change. His body contracted, not painfully, not forcibly, but with the same naturalness with which morning fog gathers into a drop on a leaf. The enormous serpentine form folded, densified, flowed, and after a few moments, before them stood a man with the head of a dragon, tall, in white robes of a fabric resembling cloud, soft, shapeless, without a single seam, with the same silver eyes and the same long whiskers that now seemed simply part of a face. He nodded toward the columns, and from behind them appeared servants, silent, in gray robes with downcast eyes. One carried a large rough cloth sack, drawn shut with rope. The dragon took the sack, submerged one finger into it, and began to rotate it slowly. At first, nothing happened. Then Chenhu felt, not with his ears but with his skin, the air around him beginning to move. Not wind, something more subtle, more deep. The very substance of air drew toward the sack, the way water draws to a funnel, the way dust draws to flame. The white robes on the servants stirred. The dragon's whiskers stretched toward the sack. Chenhu felt a slight pressure in his lungs. Not a shortage of air, not yet, but a hint of one, a premonition. Then the dragon snapped the sack shut, pulled the rope tight, and the pressure vanished. The dragon held the sack out to Chenhu. Quote 86, quote, he said. Quote 87. Quote, a pause. Quote, 88. Quote, Chenhu took the sack, felt it pulse faintly in his grip. Alive, full, impatient. Underscore, underscore, quote, underscore, 89, underscore, underscore, he said. And the three of them left. The dragon stood between the columns of white nephrite and watched them go with an expression for which human language has no precise name. Somewhere between calculation and what, in another creature, might have been called hope. The sky outside was different. Not worse and not better, Simply different. Alive, changeable, with clouds moving too fast for ordinary wind, as if the air itself was hurrying somewhere now that its master had taken the reins again. Chenhu walked first, the sack secured to his belt with rope, tightly, with a double knot, because things capable of drawing air from a god's halls are not worth carrying carelessly. Mo walked to the right and slightly behind. Sifu walked to the left and talked. "Schemers," he said, with the intonation of a man summarizing a long internal argument. "Every last one. Not one of them helps for nothing." "Did you expect otherwise?" asked Chenhu. "I expected that a god whose brother was killed would want to kill the killer. That would have been understandable. That would have been honest. Instead, a sack of wind and a grateful mortal who will now pray to the god of air for the rest of his days." Sifu shook his head. "You understand that he bought you? Not that you used him. He used you. You leave with a sack, and he leaves with a debtor worth 1,000 common prayers." "I know," said Chenhu. "And that doesn't trouble you?" "No." Sifu was quiet for a moment. Then, "And the sack, that's a whole separate conversation. Did you notice what he said? Pierce it, not open it, not untie it, pierce it. Meaning, after use, the sack is gone. One time only." A pause. It would have been useful. Very useful. He could have found a way to release the air without making a hole, and we'd have kept it. "He made it exactly as it needed to be made," said Chenhu. "Needed by whom? By him. By us. A weapon like that should not remain in human hands." Sifu looked at the sack on Chenhu's belt, then at Chenhu himself. Quote 103, quote, he said slowly, quote 104, quote 105, quote 106, quote 107, quote. Tiger was waiting for them at the edge of the terrace. Not the way people wait, shifting weight, glancing around, showing signs of time wasted. He stood completely still, the way a stone stands that is in no hurry because it is going nowhere. But when they emerged, he turned, and in his gaze was something Chenhu had learned to recognize over these days. Not approval, something more restrained and more valuable, something resembling the satisfaction of a hunter watching a young creature and finding in it what he had been looking for. "Quote," said Tiger, not a question. "Quote, quote, quote." Tiger regarded him for a moment, with the expression that in people would mean, quote, and in a god of war meant approximately the same thing. He said at last. "Quote," said Sifu. Answered Tiger, without a trace of humor, turned and vanished. Not through a portal, simply vanished, the way a shadow vanishes when a cloud passes the sun. Sifu looked at the place where the god of war had just been. He said philosophically, "The climb to the volcano took time. There was no path. There was a slope covered in ash and solidified lava, black and porous, crumbling underfoot with a quiet crunch like breaking ice. The air grew hotter with each step, not the soft warmth of a summer hearth, but a dry, heavy heat that settled on the skin and stayed there, like cloth. The sky above the crater was different. Where clouds hang above an ordinary mountain, above this summit hung a haze, wavering, rust-tinged, smelling of sulfur and something more ancient than sulfur, something that had been here before the world had a name. Mo walked steadily, neither slowing nor hurrying, with that military endurance which is not the absence of fatigue, but the ability not to let fatigue change the pace. Sifu walked and periodically looked at the crater with the expression of a man voluntarily walking toward what reasonable people walk away from, and finding this profoundly unjust. Chenhu walked and thought about the phoenix. He had seen him once before, there, at the gorilla's forge, when the phoenix refused the fire and cited the lion's will. Refused without malice, simply refused. The way a man refuses when he has an order and no reason to break it. Now there was a reason. Now there would be no choice, only the price of choice. Chenhu tightened his grip on the sword hilt through the cloth it was wrapped in. The hilt was wrong, too long for his grip, too heavy in the balance, a weapon made for someone who knows how to use a sword, not for someone who spent his whole life with a spear and a bow. But today that did not matter. Today the sword was not a weapon, it was an argument. The crater opened suddenly, the way summits always open when the last climb drops away into the horizontal. One step, another, and then everything. The mouth was enormous, deep, and in its depths lived lava, slow, dark red, with black crusts on the surface that cracked and parted, exposing the incandescent core. Heat rose in waves. Along the crater's rim, the wind carried ash. Chenhu stopped at the edge, untied the rope at his belt, took the sack in both hands. "Move back," he said to Mo and Sifu. "How far?" asked Sifu. "As far as you can manage." Sifu looked at him, then retreated 10 paces. Mo did the same, silently, without theater. Chenhu waited until they were in position, then looked at the sack. He untied the neck. For the first moment, nothing. Then the air around him trembled, barely, the way air trembles above a hot stone. Then stronger. Chenhu felt the sack lunge from his hands, not falling down, not flying up, but lunging sideways and downward at once, because air from all directions rushed into the opening. He held it with both hands, braced his feet against the stone. The fabric went taut, firm, elastic, like a sail in a storm. From the direction of the crater came a pull of heat, but not the kind that comes from warmth, a cold kind of heat, paradoxical, the kind that belongs to a place from which warmth is departing because the thing that carries warmth is leaving. The lava in the crater stopped moving. First it slowed, grew thicker, heavier, like blood and frost. Then it stopped. Then the black crusts, which had been parting and exposing the glowing core, stopped parting, froze, drew together, darkened. The heat rising from the crater faded. Not at once, but in layers, the way light fades in a house when shutters are closed one by one. The last to fade was the lowest layer, the one nearest the lava's surface. Silence descended. True silence. Not the absence of sound, but the absence of that living background vibration produced by everything that breathes and burns and moves. The volcano had gone quiet for the first time, perhaps, in so many years that the number had no name. Underscore underscore quote underscore 122 underscore underscore, asked Sifu. His voice sounded strange in that silence, too loud, too human. No one answered. Because in the next moment the phoenix erupted from the crater. Did not rise, erupted. Swift, furious, with the frenzied acceleration of everything that has been imprisoned too long. Enormous wings spread above the crater, but they were not burning. Last time, at the forge, the phoenix's feathers had been living fire, each feather a tongue of flame, each wing beat a flash. Now the feathers were dark. Not black, but that particular color of extinguished fire that a dead campfire has. Gray with russet inside, trailing heavy dark smoke that did not rise upward but spread downward, the way smoke spreads from wet wood. The phoenix landed before them, heavily, with an impact that made the stone underfoot shudder. Enormous eyes, gold but now clouded, like gold in ash, found Chenhu instantly. "I should have killed you the first time," said the phoenix, and his voice was like the crack of burning timber, dry, sharp, with that savage energy that requires no volume. He looked at the sack in Chenhu's hands, at the taut fabric, at the twisted rope of the neck. Underscore underscore quote, underscore 124 underscore underscore. His gaze moved upward toward the sky, the direction they had come from. Quote, 125, Quote, 126, said Chenhu. Quote, 127. Quote, Sifu quietly cleared his throat. Quote, 128. Quote, he said carefully, very quietly, nearly to himself. Quote, 129. Quote, quote, 130. Quote, said Chenhu without turning. Quote, 131. Quote, Sifu answered honestly. The phoenix looked at Chenhu. Quote, 132. Quote, he said. Quote, 133. Quote, quote, 134. Quote, said Chenhu. He drew the sword from behind his shoulder, slowly, without haste, the way one draws not a weapon but a point of argument. The god-killer came free with the heavy metallic sound that only very large iron makes, low, sustained, almost musical. The dark metal caught the sky's light and reflected it strangely, not the way ordinary steel reflects, but deeper, with that inner luminescence found in things carrying something greater than mere matter. This blade has already drunk the blood of a god, said Chenhu. The blood of the god of typhoons. I am not a swordsman, that is true, but one strike will be enough, if the strike is true. The phoenix looked at the sword, then at Chenhu. Something was in his gaze. Not fear, no, gods do not fear mortals, but something else, more complex. Recognition, perhaps. Assessment. I watched you at the tournament, he said slowly. You are a fighter without a sword. Bow, spear, fists, yes, but not a sword. You hold it like a club. A brief pause. That is precisely why you need the primordial fire, to give the weapon a new form, so the gorilla can reforge it into something you know how to fight with. The phoenix tilted his head. But the gorilla is blind. The lion took his sight for the very act of forging this sword. A blind smith reforges nothing. Chenhu did not answer. Mo and Sifu exchanged a glance, quick, nearly imperceptible. You know everything, said Chenhu at last. I know fire, answered the phoenix simply. And fire knows everything it has ever touched. They looked at one another. The mortal with the sword he did not know how to wield, and the god of fire without fire, feathers trailing smoke. On the summit of a volcano, above solidified lava, in a silence this place had never known. Chenhu did not lower the sword, did not loosen his grip on the sack, simply stood, with that patience which is not calm, but stubbornness that has endured long enough to become indistinguishable from calm. Return the air, said the phoenix at last. And in the words there was no longer a command, there was a transaction. Return the air, and you will have what you came for. Chenhu sheathed the sword, took the sack in both hands, found a spot on the fabric where the weave was tightest, and drove his short belt knife into it. The air came out at once, all of it, together, with the long, exhaling sound of a sail going slack when the wind abandons it. The sack shriveled, collapsed, became simply a piece of coarse cloth. Chenhu looked at it for a moment, at what it had been, and what it was now. Then let it fall. Sifu exhaled, long, with feeling. Useful thing, that was, he said quietly. Something came alive in the crater. First, a distant rumble, almost inaudible, like the ringing in ears after a blow. Then, the dark crust on the lava's surface began to part. Slowly, then faster, exposing the glowing core. The heat returned in layers, bottom to top. The sky above the crater became haze again. The phoenix spread his wings, and fire appeared in the feathers again, first faint, then stronger, then full, alive, as if the fire was not returning, but remembering that it existed. The phoenix extended a talon. In the claws lay a crystal, red, deep dark red, like coal in the very heart of a good fire, transparent at the edges and impenetrable at the center, the size of a fist. Chenhu took it. The crystal was hot, not painfully, but perceptibly, like the hot handle of a kettle through thick cloth. Quote, 147, said the phoenix, looking down at him. Quote, 148. Quote, a pause. Quote, 149. Quote, 150, quote, said Chenhu. Quote, 151. Quote, 152. Quote. The phoenix looked at him a moment longer, with the expression one gives a man who has been told everything that can be told and whom it will not stop. Quote, 153, he said. Quote, 154. Quote, 155, said Chenhu. Quote, 156. The phoenix beat his wings, once, powerfully, and rose into the air. The fire in his feathers burned bright now, almost unbearably so, and the shadow he cast on the crater stone was not black, but red. He hung above the mouth for a moment, enormous, burning, resembling a small sun, and went down, into the lava, into his halls, carrying light and heat with him. Silence again, but a different silence. Alive, hot, smelling of sulfur and heated stone. Chenhu looked at the crystal in his hand. Sifu stood beside him and was quiet, which in itself was a sign that what had happened had affected him more than usual. Mo looked to the side, toward the place where the volcano ended and the descent began, with his familiar expression of a man already thinking about the next step while the others are still standing where they are. Chenhu closed his fist around the crystal. Heat through the fingers. One element of two. Ahead was the descent. The descent is always longer than the climb. Not in steps, in the mind. When you go up, there is a goal, and every step is movement toward it. When you go down, the goal is behind you, and every step is simply a step, and the legs carry the body forward while the head stays up there, at the crater's edge, where what just happened, happened. Chenhu walked and felt the warmth of the crystal through the cloth at his belt. Steady, alive, like the warmth of a coal that has not yet cooled but no longer burns. The ash underfoot crunched. The wind carried the smell of sulfur down the slope, alongside them, like an escort. Mo walked beside him, was silent for a long time, longer than usual, and his usual silence was already longer than most people's. Then he said, ___, quote, _157, a pause. Quote, _158, another pause. Quote, _159, Chenhu didn't answer immediately. They took several steps through the crumbling ash before he said, I don't know. Mo looked at him, not with judgment, with that attentive, calm gaze of people who know how to read answers in the way a man is silent, rather than in what he says. I don't know, Chenhu repeated, and it no longer matters. The sword will soon be melted down. Whatever was in it will go with the metal. Sifu, who had been walking slightly behind and until this moment had maintained an unusual silence, apparently still digesting the conversation with the phoenix, caught up with them and stepped between. That's exactly what I wanted to talk about. What? Asked Chenhu. About not being in such a hurry to melt it down. Chenhu looked at him. Listen, said Sifu, with the intonation of a man presenting completely reasonable arguments he somehow finds himself having to defend. We still need the primordial water. We're going to the turtle. The turtle is also a god. Gods, as we have established on multiple occasions, are not quick to give up what they're asked for. What if we need to persuade again? The god killer is, you know, a weighty argument in negotiations. Maybe we hold on to it a little longer? Just in case. No, said Chenhu. Chenhu. The gorilla is waiting for the sword. We promised to return with fire and the sword. Without the sword, there's no point coming with the crystal. Primordial metal can only be melted with primordial fire, and primordial fire without the metal has nowhere to go. He paused. And the gorilla needs to know we didn't lie about the curse, that the crystal is real, that we keep our word. You think he'll doubt us? I think that trust between people is built on words matching deeds, even between people and gods. Sifu was quiet. Then, you know you're a very inconvenient man? I've been told. No, I mean it seriously. Most people who go against the will of the King of Gods at least enjoy themselves a little along the way. But you, no keeping the sack, no holding on to the sword, principles in every crack. It's not principles, said Chenhu. It's calculation. What's the difference? Chenhu didn't answer, perhaps because the difference existed, but explaining it in words was harder than simply knowing it. The gorilla's forge stood where the volcano gave way to the mountain, not at the summit and not at the foot, but in that in-between place where the ash ends and the basalt begins, where the air is no longer hot but still smells of heat. The cave entrance was low, for people. For the gorilla, evidently, the entrance was exactly right, because the tracks at the threshold were his. Chenhu bent and entered first. The gorilla stood at the anvil, enormous, dark, with shoulders each wider than two men, with arms like the roots of an old tree, gnarled and completely unhurried. On the anvil lay something. Chenhu couldn't immediately make out what. Forms, several of them, of fired clay, with shapes carved inside. The gorilla covered them with a piece of canvas before anyone had a chance to get a proper look. Quote, 180, said the gorilla. His voice was what a god of the forge's voice should be. Deep, calm, with that particular weight belonging to men accustomed to speaking little, but precisely. We came, confirmed Chenhu. He pulled the crystal from his belt and set it on the edge of the anvil. It lay there glowing from within, quietly, without flashes, the way a well-cut ruby glows when a candle is brought close. Not from the surface, but from its own deepest center. The gorilla took the crystal, raised it to his face. To his sightless eyes, milky white, without pupils, turned toward a darkness no light dispels, and held it exactly as one holds something being looked at. His fingers traced the facets. Then he nodded, once, briefly, and placed the crystal on the work table by the wall. Raised the hammer. The hammer was enormous, befitting its owner, with a handle of dark wood polished to the point where it no longer looked like wood, more like something between stone and bone. The striking face was of metal so dark that beside it, the god-killer looked pale. The gorilla brought the hammer down on the crystal. The sound was strange. Not the sound of a stone splitting, not the sound of metal striking metal. Short, dry, almost wooden. And after it, a silence in which Sifu opened his mouth. Did he just? Sifu began, and stopped, because where the crystal had been a moment ago, lay dust. Red, fine, resembling ground coal. He smashed it. Sifu's voice acquired that particular quality belonging to people whose expectations have been betrayed. __quote _184 __. The gorilla did not react. He took a pinch of the dust, with 3 enormous fingers, carefully, the way one takes something priceless, raised it to his lips, and blew. The dust lifted from his fingers in a thin red cloud and drifted toward the quern by the wall. Stone, dark, set into the rock so deeply that it was impossible to say whether the smith had placed it there or it had always been there, since the rock itself. Quote, 185, said Sifu, in the tone of a man who has reached his limit. Quote, 186. He addressed the broad back of the gorilla. Quotes 187. The gorilla turned slowly, looked at Sifu with sightless eyes that nonetheless held something resembling a gaze, smiled, silently, then extended a hand toward Chenhu. Chenhu lifted the sword from his shoulder, held it in his hands for a moment, not from hesitation, but from that involuntary gesture with which one takes leave of an object that has been near for a long time, even if the object was someone else's and never quite fit. Then handed it over. The gorilla took the sword the way one takes a familiar tool, without effort, without ceremony, set it on the work table, raised the hammer. Wait, said Sifu. Is he about to do the same thing to the sword? The gorilla struck. Sparks flew from the blow in all directions, not the way sparks fly when steel meets steel, but differently, brighter, more alive, each spark not dying at once but traveling its own trajectory, like a small burning star. Several sparks reached the quern, landing in the red dust settled in its hollow. And then what happened was something for which Sifu had no words. Fire erupted from the quern. Not ordinary fire, not the kind born from flint and tinder, not the kind that lives in a hearth and consumes wood. This fire was white at its base and red at its tips, and it moved, not upward as fire is supposed to, but in all directions at once, slowly, like a dawn, unhurriedly filling the space around the quern with an even, living light. The heat from it was not scorching, but deep, the kind felt inside rather than on the skin. Primordial fire, the real thing. Here, in this cave. The gorilla was smiling, broadly, genuinely, the way people smile who have had no reason to smile for a long time and have suddenly remembered that they can. Chenhu watched the fire. Mo watched the fire. Sifu watched the fire with his mouth open and the expression of a man who had been about to say something sharp and had forgotten what. The gorilla took the sword and lowered it into a wide stone vat beside the quern. The metal met the primordial fire and began to change, not to melt in the ordinary sense, not to flow as liquid, but to change, the way the color of the sky changes before dawn, slowly, from within, with the inevitability that cannot be stopped. And then, Chenhu saw the gorilla's eyes. They were changing. Not at once, gradually, layer by layer, the way ice thaws in spring, the milky whiteness retreating from the edges toward the center, and behind it color appearing, dark, deep, brown amber, alive. The pupil emerged last, a dark point at the center that expanded and filled with what these eyes had not held for so many years that the word quote 190 itself was too small for it. Light. The gorilla looked at his hands, at the quern, at the fire, at the sword in the vat, at Chenhu. Looked. Then from his chest came something, not a word, not a cry, something primordial and enormous, like the roar of a mountain that has been silent a long time. Joy so complete that no words were sufficient for it, nor silence, nor any single sound, only everything at once. The cave shuddered. The flame in the quern surged. Sifu grabbed the wall. The gorilla roared with joy, furiously, unstoppably, the way a creature roars when it has been given back what was taken from it without justice. Then he went quiet, turned to Chenhu. In the new, living, seeing eyes stood something for which people also have no precise word. Somewhere between gratitude and debt, between relief and obligation. Quote, 191, said the gorilla. Quote, 192, said Chenhu. Quote, 193. Quote, 194, said Chenhu evenly. Quote, 195. The gorilla looked at him for a long time, then nodded, slowly, with the gravity of beings for whom a nod equals a signature. Quote, 196, quote, he said. Quote, 197, quote, he paused. Quote, 198, quote, 199, quote, asked Chenhu. The gorilla glanced at him, with the expression of a craftsman asked about work not yet finished. Quote, 200, he said, and turned back to the quern. The conversation was over. Outside, the air seemed cold, after the cave, after the crater's heat, after the whole of this day in which there had been too much fire in all its forms. Chenhu stopped at the entrance and stood for a few seconds, simply letting his skin remember what ordinary temperature was. Mo stood beside him. Sifu came out last and immediately began to talk. So now the turtle, he said, another god, another element, another adventure in which we will nearly be killed, we will nearly kill someone, and in the end we will receive another crystal or sack, or whatever the turtle has, a shell with water probably. He exhaled. I'm tired. I'm very tired. I'm tired of persuading gods. I'm tired of threatening gods. I'm tired of the fact that every time we achieve something, it turns out there's something else to achieve. Yes, said Chenhu. That's all you can say? Yes? Yes. Sifu looked at him with the expression of a man who asks for comfort and receives arithmetic. Tiger, said Mo. They turned. The god of war stood by the rock, where the shadow was deepest, where stone gave way to darkness, and watched them with the expression Chenhu had already learned to read. He knows something. He has decided something. He will not say it yet. The gorilla sent you to the turtle, said Tiger. Not a question. Yes, answered Sifu. The turtle. A pause. You're not coming with us, of course. You'll disappear at exactly the right moment again. Again, you'll have tracks to cover, or secrets to keep. Tiger looked at him, then, unexpectedly, said, With the turtle, I will come. Silence. Sifu opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. You will come? He said at last. Yes. The god of war will go to the god of water and all living things, voluntarily. Yes. Sifu considered this for several seconds. Then, quietly, almost to himself, but loudly enough for everyone to hear. I can already picture it. Two completely opposite gods. One, war, death, blades. The other, water, life, the wisdom of the turtle. Sitting, drinking sake, playing mahjong. A pause. Magnificent. Tiger did not dignify this with a response. He raised his hand. The claws passed through the air, more slowly than usual, as if even this motion had been weighed and measured, and the fabric of space parted, opening the darkness of the portal. The same cold whiteness at the edges, the same sensation of a place with no coordinates. We go, said Tiger. Chenhu stepped through first. Mo followed. Sifu paused for a moment, looked back, toward where behind the rock the volcano could be sensed, where somewhere in the cave primordial metal was slowly dissolving in primordial fire, taking on a future shape the smith had not yet spoken of. Then stepped into the portal. The darkness closed behind them. Ahead was water. Thank you for watching. So, Chenhu has obtained the primordial fire, and for the first time in hundreds of years, Gorilla regained his sight. But what will happen if the metal takes shape once again? Will Gorilla lose his vision again? More than anyone else, the gorilla god knows the answer to this. And what actions will he take because of it? Write your theories in the comments.